Okay, so this is not a normal tutorial. I'm not going to teach you how to make actual good-looking trees. No, that is not what we need to do today. Today we want to make an anime mountain with a forest on top of it, and for that we need a whole different approach. Now, the reasons why we don't want to make actual trees are two. One is because your computer will most likely spontaneously combust due to all the effort of rendering thousands of trees. And the other because there will be so much detail that it would look kind of disgusting. For example, this is one of my earlier renders of anime nature, and you see all the high detail trees. Yeah, it's pretty horrible. So we have to rely on alternative means, and that is what we are going to do. Now, if you don't know who I am, I don't blame you. Not everybody knows Talking Fork. I do anime texturing as a hobby, and whatever I learn I try to teach it here on YouTube or on Patreon. But that's enough of all of that, let us begin the tutorial. Okay, for starters, subdivide a cube to 3 subdivisions, okay? Then model it into roughly a tree-like shape. Now, for the actual tree distortion, we obviously don't want to make leaves and stuff. We want to add a displacement modifier and add a new texture, setting it to cloud and upping the size. This next move is very important, so make sure you take note. Make sure to get the direction of this displaced node to the z-axis and make the coordinates global if you want to. If you want to, make duplicates of the tree and then apply the modifier so that you have different versions, okay? You do not want the subdivision to be higher than 3 if you are using base Blender, okay? If you have Goo Engine, then you can make the subdivision higher. I'll explain why later a bit more. I have a simple setup here with the object and a sun just pointing at the back of it so that we can see how the texture works, okay? So to start the shader, delete the basic BSDF and add a noise texture, and make sure to Ctrl-T it and set the texture coordinate node to camera. This is super important because we will be using these trees as a particle object for the forest on our mountain, and we want all the textures to be relevant to where they are situated in the frame. You'll understand when we have the actual thing working later, inshallah. Okay, now downgrade the noise scale and plug a color ramp in front of it, okay? Change the colors to whatever pleases you. I went with a dull green and brown for like the leaves variation. After that, bring in a mix color in front of the color ramp and set the top socket to a yellowish brown, plugging our noise tree in the B socket. You can swap these two. You can make the color ramp in the A and the yellowish brown in the B. It's all up to you. What we are going to do now is control the separation between these two colors with a diffuse shader plugged into the factor with a normal set into its behind, into the diffuse. And that is because we do not want shadows to be in all these scraggly bits of the displacement modifier. We just want simple shadows on our trees, okay? Because remember, there's going to be a lot of trees, so we do not want too much detail. You can add a color ramp in front of this diffuse shader, but make sure you flip the black and white values, since we want the yellowish brown to signify where the light hits this tree. Okay, now we have the beginnings of a proper shader. And remember, if you set the yellowish color to the B and the color ramp to the A, you do not need to flip the black and white values of the diffuse shader. Now duplicate the mix color and bring in a gradient tree, setting the texture coordinate to camera once again. We are going to do that to all of these texture coordinates, so in default, whenever you Ctrl-T something, set it to camera and not to generated or object. Rotate this gradient on the z-axis so the darkness can appear at the bottom of the tree. This is so that we can have some extra shadows at the bottom of our tree. And since we made this relative to the camera, not all the trees will have the shadow, which is perfect, which breaks the illusion of it being 3D once used in a large scale because it doesn't look like it was duplicated. Okay, now this gradient line is a bit too straight, so bring in a noise texture, Ctrl-T it, set to camera again, and add a color ramp in front of it, plugging that into the mapping scale of the gradient node. Later, I'll just lower the x-axis of this gradient node so that it's more to the bottom, so the shadow is more to the bottom, but you can leave it like that if you please. Now plug this entire tree at the bottom of that new mix color and make sure that mix color is set to multiply. then add our color shader that we made earlier to the A socket. To add more separation between the shadows, add another mixed color with the same setup as before, but set the mixed color to color dodge instead of multiply, so it makes the white parts of the graded node brighter on the tree without making the darker parts darker like how the multiply does. This is not very necessary, but I like it because it makes more separation between the dark and the light colors, so I put it in. Now we are going to add another important aspect, which are the glowy anime-esque outlines that you see sometimes on the trees, which I have here in the reference. This is the method for those using vanilla blender. Bring in a mixed color and set it to color dodge, and plug an emission into the B socket through a shader to RGB, like so. Then duplicate that mixed color but set it to multiply. This is going to control the factor of this glowy outline. We are going to make the values that control where this emission affects the tree, okay? So bring in a diffuse shader and plug it into the B socket of that mixed color, like so, and bring in a layer weight node and plug it into the A socket through a color ramp. You can use the Fresnel setting, but I ended up using the second option. Also remember to smooth your model. Now you see how the diffuse stops the edge effect where the model has shadow. That is perfect in stopping the emission to appear on areas that should be dark, like the shadow areas. So it's only going to light up when the sun hits it. Now plug that into the factor of the emission mixed color, and there we have our outline. You can play with it to make it thicker and bigger and whatever, and brighter, whichever one you like. The final step is to make as many varieties of these trees as possible or as you like. And here I'm just going to make a rounder and shorter one as an example, because once we are in our scene, we don't want there to be too many duplicates of a singular style. And now you can admire the shader as the shadow and light moves with the angle you perceive them in. Wonderful.
Now a word from our sponsors. Wait, what's that? No sponsors? Okay. Now a word from me. I have a Patreon where I uploaded a lot of cool environments and exclusive tutorials. You can choose from 4 tier lists, but none of them are forks, because I'm the only fork, okay? You guys get to be spoons. Each spoon tier list has its own specialty. Wooden spoon gives you exclusive assets, water gives you monthly and anime environments, golden spoons gives you courses and exclusive environments, and diamond spoons gives you everything. I'm alone. The link will be in the description if you're interested, and if you're not, sorry for this interruption. And I will interrupt you no further. On with the tutorial.
Now this glowing outline is somewhat limited in vanilla blender. And if you increase the subdivision amount, the outline is not very good because of all these scraggly points here the displacement modifier adds. So I advise you to keep it on 3 if you are using vanilla blender. But if you have Goo Engine, there is a node called the curvature node, which has the rim setting. This setting outlines an object regardless of its geometry, unlike the layer weight node. In order to replace the layer weight node with this curvature node, just simply replace it with the curvature node. You don't need to do anything else. The same setup is perfect for it. But make sure to edit the sample and sample radius widgets on the curvature node. Sample radius is for the outline size of the object, and the samples at the top are how many samples you dedicate to the outline. So basically the detail. Now you see we can displace it a bunch without worrying where the glow outline will be. So if you have Goo Engine, I recommend you use the curvature node. Now we have our scene here. Let me give you a simple explanation of it. We have 3 extruded cubes with similar displacement, and one of them has that tree shader that works with the camera angle we just made. Beautiful. See how the shadow moves with the light and everything? That is what we want. If you're curious about how I made this mountain, it's literally just a cube I extruded on the x-axis and added 2 levels of displacement detail. One that gives big bumps and another that gives small detailed bumps like a mountain has. You can just add a bunch of subdivision, make one displacement texture very big and one displacement texture very small, like so. Here in front we have our foreground that kind of nicely frames our main mountain. It's just a simplified texture of what we just made with a hue and saturation node cranking the brightness way down. See, without this hue and saturation node, it's the same base color. And here we just have a basic sapling tree gen 3 with a black emission shader on it. Very simple. At the back, it's something similar to the foreground mountain, same texture, just less detail because it's further back. It's supposed to be like, you know, the further things go, the more mist and the more unclear they become. So that is what I try to replicate here. Over here by the main mountain, we have many different tree varieties. Some I merged together with smaller versions of itself and remeshed them to become one object, and then decimated them so they could be very low poly, as you can see over here. Because, you know, we're going to use this as a particle system, so we do not want it to be too high poly. Okay, now our particle system. You can call the first one a filler system. It's basically the normal basic particle system. This particle system I set with some interpolated children and also styled it to be short and fat to act as filler between the tree meshes. To get it to work right, make sure the curves option is set to strip in render properties. So wherever there are no trees, there is still something happening with this particle system. Alright, and now for the actual trees. I just added them into a collection or two and did the same particle system as before with the filler trees or the filler particles, but this time I changed the particle render settings from path to collection and selected that tree collection. And now you see how the shadows work together and move in unison. That's because of the texture coordinates set to camera. So now we do not have individual shadows for every single tree that makes it look very tiled and textured and whatever. We have something that works in unison so that the shadows move together, and each texture and tree has its own shadows so that it doesn't look like just a blank slate. And that is basically how I made this top view anime forest scene. Long name, but yes, that's how I did it. If you guys would like further detail on the scene itself, let me know in the comments, and make sure to recommend any tutorials you want for future videos. This tutorial was actually requested by someone on the Discord, and I'm sorry it took so long, but alhamdulillah I finally did it. A special thanks to those on the Patreon for always having my back. Your support motivates me to continue making videos, so thanks a bunch for that. And thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed this one, and see you in the next one. Alright, bye.